Sanibonani, Dumelang Molweni, and welcome to your #1 youth show right here on SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. Well, in Bugeliwe Expressions, on the 1st of December, we are, of course, commemorating World AIDS Day under the theme, Let Communities Lead. And as Expressions, we focus on the increase of HIV infections amongst young people. Provinces, Kaloku Mbukeli, Afana no KZN, continue to record high numbers of teen pregnancies. Le inkqubo yakho ba uzityande ityila njengomntu omtshanje mlo ukhala usakalubisi.
Hopefully impela veki be right seretu ukubeleka nenyanga entsha.
Of course, yes.
Absolutely, and of course I am your host Ulia Mavumisa. Great to have you with us right here on Expressions. Now it's exactly 5 p.m. and we are coming to you live and director from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg. Now World AIDS Day is commemorated each year, and it is an opportunity for every community to unite in the fight against HIV, show support for people living with HIV, and also remember those who fought the good fight against this epidemic disease. Now, a review of efforts in addressing the HIV and AIDS epidemic over the past 20 years paints a mixed picture. While there have been many scientific advances in HIV treatment, of course, including antiretroviral treatment and pre-exposure medication, we continue to see high numbers of infections, really. In the lead up to World AIDS Day, as in Kubi Expressions, we'll be looking at the high rise of HIV infections amongst the young people in South Africa, and also some of the causations, really, as isuka apake HIV leyo. And now our producer, Osistule Tundo, and the resident street journalist to Azaria took to the streets of Johannesburg to hear the views of abantu abatsha.
Siyanda isibalo sentsha ehaqwa igcubane le-HIV lapha kwelengabadi, ingakho ke siyithimba le-Expressions siphumile seza lapha emgwaqeni ukuthi sizozwa kahle kwintsha ukuthi ingabe lesifo singasinqanda kanjani ukuthi singasabalali kwiningizimu Afrika yonke. Angabe sapholisa amaseko Mbukeli asiza ukuthi intsha ithini.
As like young girls, we tend to focus more on preventing pregnancy than ingculazi.
We don't take into consideration the condom or contraceptives or all of that. So it always happens in the moment, where people are driven by the moment. So it just happens at that time, and then we think about it after.
It's a disease that people do know. It's just unfortunate. Some don't think there's a need to prevent. So you might know some stuff, but then you just feel like doesn't really matter.
We have never really seen the intense HIV, you know. We came in an era where HIV was a bit controllable. So, and I think that with us being warned, we see HIV is just as another flu. You know, we can still manage it. It's not intense, unlike the previous generation where they've seen the intense HIV.
Well, there you have it, Bugeli Expressions. Those are some of the views from young people really talking about their perspectives, honestly, about the HIV. Some you had them mentioning in but of course, help me unpack this discussion a little bit further. I have the honor and pleasure, of being joined and I'm in studio by two beautiful ladies. The first up is Unewa Marumo. He is a youth leader in tech, and also Mosambe, who is a GPV and HIV community activist. And they both are joining us in studio. Ladies, thanks for joining us and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Liema.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. Yes, I think perhaps let me start with you, Musa. Walk us through rather with your journey with HIV.
My journey with HIV has been the worst thing you can think of. I really wish it was in the past, because it's still happening right now, where you find a person having to explain themselves to everyone as to why is it that I am taking ARVs, or why is it that I'm not okay, because you're always questionable. The serious issue around stigma, I still struggle to understand why have we gotten to this point and the stigma is still this rife. You will meet a person that will claim to love you until you tell them who you are and they change the way they behave. It's still, it has got all those negativity around it, which we have not mastered. I wonder how long is it going to take us if we are still talking about the 95, because the biggest challenge still remains with the stigma. Fortunately enough, when you know exactly what do you want to achieve, you just say, you turn it a blind eye. with the topic today, I don't know how possible it is because you're talking about young lives of people
Yes.
that are very vulnerable, you know. But it's not an easy one unless you really develop that head of saying, say what you want. How many of us can say that?
I wonder though, how long for you personally did it take for you to be able to come to terms with HIV?
It took over 15 years. For the entire 11 years after I was gang raped, that's how I contacted the HIV. And because of what I've experienced, when my family had to deal with me not being well because of the incident, they couldn't deal with the fact that I got infected in the incident. And also it was not safe because of the very same thing. So I couldn't trust anyone with that.
I can imagine also, sorry to cut you there, I can imagine the emotional baggage that you also had to undergo because you talk about it as it was a double situation that transpired to you.
Yeah.
You got gang raped and then you also contracted HIV in that whole process.
Yes.
How was it for you emotionally during that process?
It was traumatic. It was devastating. It was scary, and it was so lonely because at the time when when the incident happened, the stigma was so rife. I think even I would have been one of those people that wouldn't touch you. People wouldn't even touch your glass that you're drinking from because we didn't understand. At that time, there was no distinction between HIV and AIDS. It was just AIDS, you know, and where they would motivate you to take your medication because you could live up to 10 years with a lot of side effects in the medication at that time. So everything was so bad, you know.
And looking now in 2023,
Yes.
would you perhaps say all of that stigma attached to people that have HIV or are living with HIV, do you think it has doubled or it has lessened?
I don't see any effect that has happened to it.
Okay.
To be honest, because that's the reason why we still have got people who are defaulting. You know, that's the reason why we still have people who won't go to the clinic. Because if I'm sitting with you here and I choose to keep my status private, which is my right to do so,
Yes.
but then my time to go and drink my medication then hits because of you, and I don't want you to know, then I'm not going to drink because I don't want you to know that this is what I'm suffering from unless I make up an idea, something that I'm going to think of, okay, let me do this, you know. So you can't live lying all the time, you know. So we have not done much.
We have not done much. Well, Newo Yamumva Umusa is talking about her story and the fact that not much has been done really up to this far. I think for you, Mhlambe Ngakosichazela, what is your mandate as a TAC, particularly with fighting cases and issues HIV?
Firstly, I would like to agree with Comrade Musa here. So I don't think we are going to win the HIV battle. Firstly, the discrimination and stigma, it's still taboo. Everyone, okay, yes, the treatment, the stigma is still taboo. And then people are stigmatized in the facilities. People are discriminated. So that's why we're having a lot more defaulters and laws to follow up. So as TAC, our mandate is advocate to strengthen the healthcare system.
Okay.
So our daily work is to monitor the facility, how do the facility work on a daily basis. So people are defaulting due to waiting lines. Young people are defaulting because they say they have youth-friendly services, but when you get to the facilities, there are no youth-friendly services. People don't get information, treatment literacy, treatment education, they don't do it at the facilities. And again, psychosocial support, that is why most of the people default and we have lots of follow-ups in our country.
Okay.
As we have estimation of 600 young people getting infected per week in Gauteng, it's because people don't get information. Young people, they are not treated with a dignity at the facilities. So as TAC, we are fighting for dignity and equally and affordable services at the facilities.
Yeah, you talk about, you know, the healthcare system and the fact that it's really experiencing some sort of backlog in terms of trying to deal and even catch up with the HIV, you know, on the rise and the numbers on the rise. But however, I wonder, thus far in 2023, do you think you also as the TAC, you are fighting and successfully fighting and effectively fighting the fight against HIV, or you still think all the multi-stakeholders involved should still pull up their socks?
As TAC, I think we should, all the multiple organizations still need to pull up their socks, because again, we have implementing partners. Abagijimi numbers. Well, like they say, we have 10 HIVs, but the 1990, we don't reach the 1990 strategy because it's test and treat. You test people, you get initiated, but they are not suppressed because of we don't do follow-ups. We don't do psychosocial support. So I don't think we're going to win this battle anytime soon.
You also alluded to something very important because you were mentioning, some of the campaigns that you're involved with as the TAC. You monitor EE's bedlele,
Yes.
and what has been the common reception that you'd always find in all of these hospitals?
Okay, the common reception is long waiting hours. People, long waiting hours, people but end up abang facilities because of they wait long, and then people, but they are not decanted, and then people, they will give you 1 month and say come back next month. So people get tired, some are waking. And then another thing, there's a lack of information in Goma facilities. They don't do bloods, they don't take bloods, they don't do information, and nurse don't tell Luyema to say, Luyema, you are drinking Dalutsagravir Luyema, and Luyema, the reason unama side effects is because of
such
this.
and such.
And then your results are these. Is it difficult diakonai, viral load diakonai.
Okay.
So this is like, all right, Luyela. So hambi kai all right. I don't know your writing on. So these are the issues, and index testing in our facilities are by pushing index testing. By pushing index testing, and then again, I think psychosocial support your contributor cool, because some people end up stopping taking medication because of treatment fatigue.
Okay.
Other people treatment holiday. Other people, they say I don't have ukudla endlini, so I can't take my treatment.
Okay.
So
unfortunately, we have to go to a break. Unfortunately, we have to go to a break, but we shall continue with this really important conversation. This is Expressions. Do definitely stay with us. We'll be right back.
The awareness hasn't really worked as best as it should have, because still people are having unprotected sex, they are doing risky activities, and access to medicine such as PrEP is unknown about, and a lot of young people are just ignorant about it.
I've not seen any campaign currently that is focused on youth, specifically on how we can actually prevent ourselves from getting HIV.
I don't think there can ever be enough campaigns to teach us about it, but I think they're not youth-friendly. It's always something that's being told maybe at a clinic or maybe somewhere in the corner on campus, and it's not face-to-face, not interactive.
See the lifestyle adversities, younger girls sleeping with older men. The culture that's been created within our country has been to our own demise. So I feel like if we change our perspective and perception on it, that should help younger people in the country.
There's way more than enough. Like literally, you can find anything about HIV anyway. I mean, you find your condoms in basic school toilets, so that should say enough of how like campaigns are. So I think that they're doing enough, and it's just like onto us, honestly, just being responsible.
Young people on the streets being expressive, of course. Welcome back. You are still watching your #1 youth show, Expressions. As we are approaching International World AIDS Day, we put a spotlight on HIV infections amongst young people in South Africa. Siyabuza Mbukeli, is the youth of South Africa educated enough in terms of HIV prevention and treatment? Join this conversation on our social media pages. We are, of course, on Facebook, Expressions, TikTok, Ikamalenko Bongo Expressions_10. Joining me to unpack this further is Khanyi Sandoda, content creator and HIV activist. Khanyi, welcome to Expressions. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Carlosa, for having me, and to the viewers at home. Hello.
Hello, yeah. Hello. Khanyi, I mean, over the years, I mean, we had a Vox on the first segment, you know. She shared something very interesting, that as this generation, you haven't really seen the intensity of HIV and AIDS compared to the previous generation where there were campaigns. It was treated as a public health crisis. Why are we seeing a rise of young people being infected? Resources, do you think they are enough?
Well, I don't think the resources are enough, because as a content creator on my platform, I engage with a lot of people who have questions. So that clearly points out that we do lack resources when it comes to education around HIV. So, with the people that I usually connect with, they're always asking me general questions about HIV, which I feel that if there's somebody, you know, in the system who is employed, maybe let's say a nurse, they can really explain those questions without me having to interact with these young people who get to ask me such basic questions. So I strongly believe that the resources are not enough. Yes, maybe there are campaigns that are addressing these issues, but those campaigns, they don't get to reach to us.
Yes, and I mean, another Vox on the street also mentioned that, yes, there are campaigns, but I've never really had a campaign that is directed to young people. And as a social media content creator, I mean, you advocate and you give sort of advices. And by talking about this, I mean, you're making it normal so that even those who are suffering from the stigma, you are actually breaking the cycle. I want to understand, Wena, I mean, one of the issues is like we are scared of being pregnant more than getting HIV. And one of the things that you said earlier on is, treatment is because of the side effects. Can you just elaborate on that?
Yes, Colossa, the side effects, they become severe at times. I can talk about my experience as well with the dolutegravir that I take. At first, I had insomnia. And to tell you, if somebody has insomnia just after taking medication, they wouldn't obviously be focused in a sense that they want to take their medication. You see, with our ARVs, we do get some piece of paper enclosed in our containers that strictly explain these things. But this information cannot be really passed out to somebody who is maybe illiterate, because all the information comes written in English. So the side effects are the thing. I usually engage with people telling me that I'm so tired, I had diarrhea, I have rashes, and I don't want to look like this.
And who do we blame? Because obviously, I mean, the health systems are aware of these side effects.
Yes, obviously, some have reported to me that they do report the side effects, but you'll find nurses saying, you know, you need to be focused on their preventions. If it's TEE or TLD, and you also need to look at the grams that we usually get from the medication. But if I can tell you, when they give us color, we usually experience things, and we do communicate that to the nurses, and I feel that that is not communicated well to the higher authorities, because even if I still experience that, when I come back and I report the same thing, you'll find that nothing much is done.
Nothing much is done. I really wish we had the Department of Health so that they really address this issue. And we see that, I mean, this is quite prevalent in the provinces like KZN, Eastern Cape, and especially in the rural parts. Do you think, especially young girls, because, of course, yes, campaigns is but why on young girls in the rural areas? And considering the fact that young people are on social media, do you think lezempilo are missing an opportunity of addressing it on social media?
Of course they are. You know, young people in the rurals, I can say they are usually forgotten when it comes to giving out the knowledge, because, you know, being in the rural, obviously we can look at the poverty. A lot of kids in the rural areas are struck by poverty. The unemployment rate is striking high as well. So their parents are not working, right? And, you know, being born again is a disadvantage on its own, because, you know, if we can look at a lot of things that gets to happen, talk about rape, talk about domestic violence. If we can check at the victims, you'll find out it's young girls, and mostly, you know, from the rural areas. So another thing that could be actually being missed, you know, when it comes to this education is like empowering young boys as well. Because you'll find that people are always talking about young women, a girl child, but who is actually giving us these infections? Because, you know, who is sleeping with these girls who
it's the young boys.
Exactly.
So as much as we motivating young girls, where do we leave the boy child? Kanyisa, thank you so much for joining us and the amazing work that you do of being the voice of the voiceless.
Thank you so much.
Right in Mugeliwe Expressions, you are still tuning into your #1 youth show. We are talking about HIV and AIDS. Do you think enough is being done to educate Wena Mbukeli Ongumdomcha Epikaya? Make sure that you do interact with us on our social media platforms. We do continue with this conversation. Let's take a quick commercial break. Do not move a muscle.
Welcome back to SABC One right here on Expressions. Thanks very much for staying with us as we continue to have a conversation really about HIV, which is on the rise, and also with young people also being a part and parcel of that. And of course, I still have rather my guests joining me namhlanje in a studio. I think, Musa, when I come back to you, I think, you know, during the ad break, we're talking about the fact that now we want to particularly focus on young people who are, you know, part and parcel of HIV. Perhaps what do you think should be done in terms of educating them even further and also trying to cap this rise of numbers?
It will be a mistake for me to just jump to that without speaking about the reality of what is happening. Why is it that young people are infected in this much, in large numbers? The system that we have is not addressing the issue the way it's supposed to be. Young women, young girls, and young boys right now, they have a use of a term that is called hustling. How possible is it that a child who is living in an informal settlement, it's a children-headed family, and they're supposed to make sure there is food? They're dating an elderly person because most of the time, if you look at who infects them, is the person that say, if I give you 10,000 rand, I'm going to sleep with you without a condom. We can't push it to irresponsibility. We can't only push it to education. Let's talk about the reality of a South African child who's young right now, who gets to make this decision, not because they're just misbehaving or that. Before we address that, we would not be doing great. Let's look at the system. How are we dealing with it?
Let's trace it back and look at the system. I think just in closing, Mewa, from you, your last words, and also what should still be done, particularly by us as the normal citizens, to try and curb this rise in numbers.
I think as
Musa
spoke, I agree with her that the system is failing us. The system is failing young people. So we will focus on a young girl who's getting infected, forgetting about the young boy, forgetting about the key population and the vulnerable group. So I think we should do awareness. We should the government should roll out. They should roll out the prevention method, the pre-prophylaxis exposure, the PEP, because young people don't get such medication at the facilities. And even condoms are always out of stock.
Always out of stock.
Always out of stock. So I think we should, the government should make sure and give more resources to the facilities. Thank you.
Give more resources to the facilities and being able really to reach that normal young person on the street and literally everywhere. But unfortunately, that's where we leave it for this particular conversation. Thanks for joining us, Kola.
Oh, yes. And thank you, Bugeliwe Expression, for joining us on this very important discussion. Bye.
Letting Jamulo and